Hey Mel.
Hey, Michelle, how's it going?
Good. Um, we're starting off laughing as we often do because we've just had the most animated discussion offline or before coming live about, oh my God, what are we going to talk about? Because there is so much going on for both of us. So Mel, you just had this really bizarre experience. Well, I shouldn't say bizarre, not entirely bizarre, but you've had an experience of Palm Springs. You were there last week, and there were a lot of things that struck you, and really, I guess, for those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, Mel and I are about leveling the playing field for all humans, about inclusion, about checking our privilege, about trying to leave the world in a better state than when we joined it. And a few things confronted you when you were there, didn't they, Mel? So I kind of want to talk about that and then segue into what's making my head explode at the moment, as usual.
Okay. Yeah, so I got to visit a new place. It was not a place I'd been to before. And I'll say full disclosure that I was on PTO. My partner had a conference there, and I had the privilege to take
What,
some time off.
Mel,
And
sorry, what's PTO? What's
oh,
PTO?
paid time off.
Oh, all right.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's all
not
good. Yeah.
Americanism. And yeah, so there several privileges in there. I'm lucky to work in a full-time job where I've got paid time off, and I took a little break, but it was an interesting place where one of the things that stood out to me the most was the sort of discrepancy between uh, my parents would call it the haves and the have-nots. There's a very large gap between the people who are privileged enough to visit there or live in a nice home there versus those who are in the working class,
Hmm. Hmm.
among other things.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things that we talked about was kind of the experience. I guess we talked about privilege and empathy and how the two go hand in hand, as in understanding your privilege and having empathy. And then when they're not evident, it's really evident that they're not evident. So, how do I do this discreetly?
Well,
one,
yeah,
yeah,
let
go
me
on.
ask you. So one of the experiences that I had led me to talk with you a little bit before we started live about the sort of internalized patriarchy, internalized sexism. So maybe a good place to start would be just for our listeners, tell them what does that even mean? What does it mean to have
Yeah.
internalized sexism?
So, internalized sexism, internalized patriarchy is often so. The patriarchy is a system. It's a system that benefits one part of society. Often, well, in most cases, it's a system that's been built and maintained to meet the needs of uh, predominantly white, straight, male humans. And that doesn't mean that all men are patriarchal and are sexist, but it does mean that men benefit from a system, the patriarchal system. In my world, so I also benefit from that because I am white. I am educated, and by an accident of birth, there's a whole bunch of stuff. So I've got some privilege that's been bestowed on me and maintained through patriarchal systems. And sexism is, of course, well, I shouldn't say of course. So sexism, whether it's overt, covert, benign or maligned or malignant, I should say, is where we make a judgment call about another person based on their sex, their gender, and it's typically a negative one. So a sexist comment. Oh, haven't you got nice legs, love? Or, hey, Mel, how about you go and get the cups of tea for everyone in the meeting? There's a whole range of different things. When we talk about the internalized patriarchy, internalized sexism, it's where and I'll use myself as an example, where I've been brought up in a system that teaches me a certain way and socializes me to think a certain way. And it means that I internalize some of that stuff and I act it out. So I might relish sexist comments because it's bringing attention to me and my appearance. I don't. I might relish being in an environment which is homogenous because I feel safe, because I have affinity with the folks around me, because they look like me, they sound like me, they've got the same background and lived experience as me, and it's very, very comfortable. So there's really complex subject, but essentially, it comes out. Now, where the context in which we're talking about is where I find it most difficult to manage myself is when I have another woman say to me, and often a woman with unearned privilege, say, well, things are so much better, and I've never experienced sexism in the workplace or everywhere else, so I don't think it really exists. Now, that's a very black and white version of saying it, but it'll come out in certain ways. I don't think that must happen, because I've been okay. I've progressed my career. Look at me. I am successful. So through hard work, I've been able to get there. So every woman should be able to get there, which completely diminishes the lived experience and the barriers that all women, but in particular some women from underrepresented and marginalised groups. When I say underrepresented and marginalised, I mean in the workplace and in leadership. It diminishes their experience. So my experience as a white, educated, gay, middle-aged woman is very, very different to a woman who's not gay of the same age. But it's also much better than a woman who is Aboriginal or Torres Strait or black, because a woman who identifies as a First Nations woman, an Indigenous woman, a black woman of my age is unlikely I beg your pardon, more likely to have more barriers in front of her than me. So me saying, but look at me, I'm successful, so all women can be successful if you just work hard, is completely and utterly diminishing those other women and their experience.
Yeah, the other thing that I was reminded of in our chat here before this is this problematic idea of sort of, well, I'll just be one of the guys. I'm just one of the guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I've experienced that in some places, and I think it typically happens before women get to the point where they're hitting walls at higher levels, before they realize the problem with that kind of belief. So I wonder if you want to comment on that.
I will give my own experience, because hey, I have been a paid up member of the patriarchy. So until I hit those barriers, and from an age perspective, I was probably in my late 30s, early 40s, I would say things like, I love working with men, and I do, but I prefer to work with men. I prefer to hang out with guys. Women are bitchy. Women just cut you down. I am one of the guys. I can drink harder, swear harder, run harder, work harder, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that is exactly how I was, until such time as I worked out I wasn't one of the guys, because I was encountering barriers that my peers weren't. They were advancing and I wasn't, for a range of reasons. And look, some of it might have been my performance, but a lot of it wasn't. But those statements are evidence of that. And there's part of that, Mel, is, and certainly someone of my generation who did come into leadership relatively early from an age perspective for my generation. Of course, there weren't a lot of women around, so I didn't have a lot of female role models. The couple that I did have were great, but there just weren't enough of them to teach me how to be a woman, and an authentic woman who was very comfortable in her own skin, rather than doing what I knew instinctively I had to do, which was to assimilate and become like So I didn't stand out and I could move with that crowd. So that assimilation, and I've written about it a couple of times. It takes a lot of energy, I tell you. Until you stop doing it, you don't realise how much energy it does take and how much energy then you've got left over to do great stuff. But yeah, it's a very, very real thing, and which is why it's so important for, well, number one, to realise it, because with awareness, you can't unknow stuff. You can choose not to take action, but knowing and then thinking, well, so what do I do about this? I think that's important. But I also think it then creates the opportunity to say, well, who else might feel this way? Who else can I help? It's the empathy and starting to, I guess, think beyond oneself. So think collectively rather than individually. Which I'm drifting into a whole other topic of conversation, but
yeah, this
individualism is versus collectivism. But yeah,
many cans of worms for sure.
Oh yeah.
So, we have a lot of women followers here today, and I guess what's something that you might want them to take away from our little chat here, exploring these ideas of internalized sexism?
Well, the very first thing I want any human who's watching today is to check their privilege. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean that in how privileged are you? Please learn about privilege. And, I will say, hand on heart, the first time someone said to me, whoa, check your privilege, lady, I went, I'm not privileged. I've had to work hard for everything that I've done, until I started to learn what is privilege, what is unearned privilege, what is the patriarchy or the patriarchal systems, and how have I benefited from it? What is colonisation and how have I benefited? I still benefit. I benefit every day from colonisation in Australia. So check your privilege, and in fact, Google me, michelleredfern.com, and I've got an exercise, walk a mile, and I'll share it with you. It's a nice, easy way to do a quick quiz to go, okay, here's some stuff that you might want to learn about how you've got advantages in life that others haven't, and they've got nothing to do with anything that you've done. My white skin, who I was born to, where I was born in the world. I didn't do anything to control that, but I have advantage.
Yeah, and let's just break that down for just a moment. So you and I are white, and that is considered a privilege because it means that very likely in the societies that you and I live in, so the United States and Australia respectively, it means that we very likely have not encountered a challenge to something like getting a job or getting housing as a result of the color of our skin. That's all it means. It doesn't mean
Correct.
that, we didn't have a hard childhood or didn't have to work hard. That's not what we're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. So there's, and look, there's a lot of reading that can be done, but start off simple. Google check your privilege, and there are literally a myriad of articles, and as I said, I've got something, but it's when you start to understand how to walk, which is why I call this exercise the activity I've created, a walk a mile. When you can walk a mile in another person's shoes, you can start to build the awareness, but build empathy, and really use empathy, which we know is such an important leadership skill, and I think up until recently completely undervalued. But when you build empathy for others, you can then use that platform of privilege, of power, and of influence to actually make life better for others who haven't got that platform of power and privilege and influence that you have.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't have to, it can be tiny little things, everyday acts of kindness, compassion, and inclusion. They're really easy.
Absolutely. So I just want to wrap on, if there are any women out there listening to this and, you know, you have run into challenges and you feel like you want some support, we're here for you. You can access either of us very easily. And yeah, we're here for you.
Don't be a stranger. Don't be that's what Mel and I are here to do. We can help you navigate. Sing out. We're here on all the socials.
Yeah.
All right. We'll do this again next week, Mel.
We will. We'll see you all next week. Thanks, Michelle.
Okay. See ya. Bye.
Bye.